Hey there, folks. First off, hope everyone had a lovely breakfast, some coffee, some tea. For those traveling in, really appreciate you making the journey to Half Moon Bay. Hopefully we'll see some sun as we get a little bit later in the day. Yeah, this is our second DataGrail Summit, so we're thrilled to have many folks with us. I see some familiar faces, which was great to see. I think, keeping the theme that we did last year, bringing security, privacy, and legal to the same conversation, is something we're pretty excited about and passionate about. This particular session, though, today, we'll be looking at responsible innovation. So we hear from speakers talking about what this means and what it means for the industry. I'm going to kind of kick us off to just talk about how we got here. As we sort of think about innovating for tomorrow, I think taking a step back, I don't know if folks remember a company called Yammer. Does anyone remember? Hands? Yammer? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I first moved to San Francisco in 2011. Yammer was just taking off. It was this idea of an enterprise social network, an ESN. But I think what was interesting at this time, SaaS was starting to change the industry, right? Companies were investing in tools like Yammer, and IT was starting to become decentralized. People were using tools in marketing, in customer support, in customer success, in sales, and perhaps not making that request to IT, or perhaps not engaging with the legal team like they have been before. And I think this was a start of a trend we've seen now with product-led growth, where you can really, anyone in this room can go find a new tool, something that's interesting, go and install it on your computer. Perhaps it's the next productivity app. But the reality is that leads to some challenges with the topics we're going to talk about today. So if we think about what this looks like in today's environment, there's a stat that Okta put out in their modern work report. And what they've looked at is how many systems are generally in use within a workforce. So if you're an average Okta customer and you've been using Okta for perhaps 4 years, so those that are perhaps not familiar with Okta, it's a tool to manage your other software tools in the organization and ensure security. If you've been using Okta for about 4 years, the number of applications is roughly about 200 that are connected to that Okta environment. So this is a significant number, right? If we're tasked with trying to understand the security risk, the privacy risk of those applications, that's a large number. I joked with some of the folks in the room last night over our dinner with our customer advisory board. The number's a little larger than 200, though. So if you look at Netskope's data, Netscope is a tool that looks at the network of traffic within an organization, and they look at companies between 500 and 2,000 employees. The number's actually 1,500 distinct systems. So obviously there's a pretty substantial gap here, right? We haven't addressed this as an industry. While we talk about shadow IT and we'll talk about AI a lot today, we're still trying to figure out and reconcile these two numbers. And so I think, acknowledging what we're going through, it's very exciting, and the software tools that our teams are leveraging is very exciting. We still haven't addressed this core challenge. So as we think about AI, and this change now happening again, we haven't addressed shadow IT, but what we are actually seeing is those 1,500 applications, many of them could have AI sub-processors, right? Whether that's Anthropic or OpenAI, in the background running, processing our collective personal information. And businesses are trying to figure this out. This is still a challenge, and probably will be for quite some time, given we didn't actually address the shadow IT challenge that we just had last week, right? So we'll talk a lot about this today, but I think that some of the trends that we're seeing, and I've seen through this market for quite some time, I don't think anyone needs to be aware. We need a federal privacy bill in the United States. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. Our last survey, we saw about 80% of folks recognizing that they are looking for some form of protection. While we see a lot of action across the states, it's becoming pretty difficult, right, to understand what are you going to do. Are you keeping a level standard across all of the respective US states, or do we wait for hopefully a federal privacy bill, which Certainly not this year. What we're also seeing, though, and I don't want to steal the thunder for a coming session, we did a survey of around 5,000 different websites, and from that survey, 75% of the websites actually continue to track you after you opt out. So we've all seen cookie banners and the experience that is. It's not a great one. I think no one in this room would be excited to see a cookie banner as they reach a website. But let's be honest, when you actually engage with the cookie banner and you're hopefully trying to address your preferences, you actually hope they work. Sorry to tell you, they probably don't. This is largely because the challenge that marketers, privacy teams, legal teams, security teams are dealing with, which I think everyone in this is aware, the website and the applications that are used on the website are changing so frequently, it's actually very challenging to keep up. And clearly businesses are struggling to do this. If we think about what this means, right? So we released our modern privacy trends report. This is actually the third year that we've run that report, so we do it annually. And one of the takeaways was over a 200% increase in privacy request volume. So people requesting, whether that's access, deletion, opt-outs, many different varieties of privacy requests. What I think's most interesting that's not reflected on this slide, though, is that actually the increase in access requests, so people asking, hey, what type of information do you have about me? I'm just genuinely curious. That increased 7x over the period. So I think that sort of highlights that people are trying to understand how businesses are using their information, clearly at an increasing rate. And I think no one in this room needs to, we're all working through that together. But I think this probably won't slow down, right? If we think that a federal privacy bill provides more, sort of highlights the point, or if states continue the way we are, it's highly likely that people will continue to want to understand how businesses are using their information, because ultimately they are looking for control and really choice. So if we think about this, and kind of wrapping up here as we go through our presentation, trust is really what we're looking to do. We had an animated discussion last night on this topic, and I think that what's most interesting related to privacy, clearly people are trying to understand how businesses are using their information, but ultimately why they're trying to do that is because they want transparency. We're going to hear from someone who's an industry leader in this area, but I think that really if we take a step back, like there are many things we can do from a compliance standpoint, these do matter. But ultimately, if a business loses trust at the beginning of the relationship, it's probably pretty difficult to regain that trust. And so, as we think about innovation and the things we'll talk about today, really building with trust is sort of what we think is the right way to present the market forward, and move this conversation beyond just sort of the tactical levels of perhaps trying to be compliant. So as we transition to our keynote speaker, one thing that we're pretty passionate about is the people that are doing really great work in privacy. There are a number of teams that we've seen just really excel in their ability to provide transparency to the consumer or to the user. And this year, we're going to start to showcase that in our Data Privacy Hero Awards. One example that comes to mind, who's familiar with the company Dexcom? They're a glucose monitor. Yeah, great. Okay. So if you take a moment today, go have a look at Dexcom's website. They have a trust center. They've had it in place for about 2-3 years now. Eric Lovell is the privacy leader on the Dexcom team. Really great organization. This is just one example. I would say sort of highlights what we're looking to do. I'm not going to steal the thunder from Lauren, who will talk about what this means and how we're thinking about the Privacy Awards, but it's an exciting initiative that we're going to roll out this year, and you'll see more details about this today.